The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hello, and welcome to the 43rd edition of the Coach's Corner Roundtable on the Hoop Heads Podcast. Each episode of the Coach's Corner Roundtable will feature our all-star lineup of guests answering a single basketball question. A new Coach's Corner Roundtable will drop around the 15th of each month. July's Roundtable question is, what is the number one lesson you've learned from one of your players or teams over the course of your coaching career? Our coaching lineup this month includes Dominic Amarosa from Strake Jesuit College Prep, Erik Buehler from Chatfield High School, Joe Crispin from Rowan University, Joe Harris from Lake Chelan High School, Tim Jackson, author of Understanding College Athletics Through the Eyes of College Athletes, Bob Krizancic from Menor High School, Dell Leonard from Mountain Home High School, Matt Monroe from St. Ignatius College Prep, Matthew Raidbard, author of Lead Like a Pro, John Schulman from the University of Alabama Huntsville, and Joe's Decision from Unleashed Potential. Please enjoy this roundtable episode of the Hoop Heads Podcast, and once you're finished listening, please give the show a 5-star rating and review after you subscribe on your favorite podcast app. If you're a basketball coach at any level, please check out our Hoop Heads Coaching Mentorship Program. You'll get matched with one of our experienced head coaches and develop a relationship that will take your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset to another level. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at HoopheadsPod for the latest updates on episodes, guests, and events from the Hoop Heads Pod. Hey Hoopheads, practice like the pros this July with our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market. Save up to $4,000 on multi-unit orders in the month of July. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoop Heads Podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoop Heads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
Hi, this is Dominic Amarosa, head boys basketball coach at Strake Jesuit College Prep in Houston, Texas, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
If you're looking to improve your coaching, please consider joining the Hoop Heads Mentorship Program. We believe that having a mentor is the best way to maximize your potential and become a transformational coach. By matching you up with one of our experienced mentors, you'll develop a one-on-one relationship that will help your coaching, your team, your program, and your mindset. The Hoop Heads Mentorship Program delivers mentoring services to basketball coaches at all levels through our team of experienced head coaches. Find out more at hoopheadspod.com or shoot me an email directly, mike@hoopheadspod.com. Follow us on social media at hoopheadspod on Twitter and Instagram, and be sure to check out the Hoop Heads Podcast Network for more great basketball content. Prepare like the pros with the all-new Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Fast Draw has been the number one play diagramming software for coaches for years. You'll quickly see why Fast Model Sports has the most compelling and intuitive basketball software out there. For a limited time, Fast Model is offering Hoopheads listeners 15% off Fast Draw and Fast Scout. Just use the code HHP15 at checkout to grab your discount, and you'll be on your way to more efficient game prep and improved communication with your team. Fast Model also has new coaching content every week on its blog, plus play and drill diagrams on its Playbank. Check out the links in the show notes for more. Fast Model Sports is the best in basketball. Let's hear from our panel about the number one lesson they've learned from one of their players or teams over the course of their coaching careers. Dominic Amarosa, Strake Jesuit College Prep in Houston, Texas.
This is Dominic Amarosa from Strake Jesuit in Houston. One of the things I've learned from players over the years is to give them the benefit of the doubt, especially when it comes to making final decisions.
Erik Buehler, Chatfield Senior High School, Littleton, Colorado.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Erik Buehler from Chatfield Senior High, and this month we were asked, what's a lesson that we've learned from a player or a team that we've coached. And a major one that comes to mind for me is actually a player that I had graduate this past year who had cerebral palsy, and he had very limited use of his whole right side. And his whole life and his whole basketball career, he had to learn how to basically just use his left side, his left hand, and then just kind of overcompensate in every other area aside from the physical side of basketball to actually become a starter and become a varsity basketball player. And he actually finished 4th in the state in three-pointers made this past season in the highest division in Colorado. And the lesson that I learned from him was find a way. And just because there's a traditional way of doing something or a traditional way of looking or playing basketball doesn't mean that's the only way. And Parker, this player that had these limitations, he just always found a way to overcome and to be actually elite and excel, and one of the best that I've ever coached in many other areas of the game. And because of that, I'm really hoping he gets into coaching because he's one of the smartest basketball minds I've ever been around. But there's always a way other than the traditional way to figure something out and to overcome. So that's the lesson I've learned. Hopefully that helps someone else out there. Hope everyone else out there is doing good, having a great summer, and I'll talk to you guys next time.
Joe Crispin, Rowan University.
Joe Crispin, head men's basketball coach at Rowan University. The number one thing I've learned from my players, I naturally could choose a variety of things, but I think the biggest one is just taking the time to listen to them, because if I listen well, they'll tell me who they want to be. And I mean that both individually and collectively. I think this is very hard to do. We often have a vision for who we want a team to be, and sometimes we don't pay enough attention to what the players actually want individually and collectively, and what our limitations are. And I think a lot of times our limitations are the best guide, and one of those limitations are literally what the players want. Individually, this means if you watch them play, which I often spend a lot of time doing at the beginning of a season, they're going to tell you what they want to become great at. They're going to tell you what they can contribute to the team, and it might not be exactly what you think. Not only that, they're going to tell you what they're willing to work on in the off season. And if you show that you're willing to listen to them and work with them and encourage them to do those things and work on, let's just say it's, shooting open jumpers for guys who might not naturally be inclined to it, they're going to work harder in the off season to become good at those things for your future. And the same thing is collectively. Some teams may not want it as much as other teams. And I've found that if maybe you loosen the reins a little bit and are a little more relaxed with those groups, they actually exceed their own expectations. Other groups are very clear that they want a championship. They want to win every game. And naturally, those are the easiest to work with. But oftentimes I do a simple exercise with individuals and teams, and I just ask them, what do we want? What do you want? I let them define it. And then the next question is, okay, now what do we need to do to get what you want or what we want? And often the answers become pretty plain. So I'm not always the best listener, but that's something I'm always working on. Listen to our players in action and word and deed, and they'll often tell you what they want and what they can become great at.
Joe Harris, Lake Chelan High School, Lake Chelan, Washington.
Hello, Hoop Heads. This is Joe Harris at Lake Chelan High School with today's roundtable question. It asks us, what is the number one lesson you've learned from one of your players or teams over the course of your coaching career? There are many lessons the game of basketball can teach any of us. The game has taught me one of these lessons early on in my career. The lesson that I learned was your players want you to care for them, and they need us more off the court than they do as a coach on the court. We are really more than coaches. We are role models, mentors, and a sometime confidant, just to name a few. As coaches, it's very easy for us to get caught up in just the X's and O's, the scouting of our opponents, and player development, to name a few. But our players want want to know that we care more about them than just on the court. Basketball really is just a tool for us to help them navigate their way through life. And each of our players has a story to tell, and we should always listen for that story. The trust that this creates when you show that you do listen and do care about them, and about more than just basketball, will always pay great dividends on the court and beyond it. It's a bond that you and your players and teams will share well beyond their playing days. Appreciate you having me on this episode. Keep growing your game.
Tim Jackson, author of Understanding College Athletics Through the Eyes of College Athletes.
This is Tim Jackson, a former basketball player at Canton McKinley, Hall of Famer from Youngstown State, and current author of Understanding College Athletics Through the Eyes of College Athletes. The most important lesson I learned from coaching is that winning is not everything. I was taught that as a player, that winning is everything. But as a coach, I learned that improvement, commitment to players through thick or through thin, and enjoying the journey and not just the wins and losses. Losing is hard, but players not enjoying the ride is tougher to deal with in the bigger picture of life. So I would say the most important lesson for me when I was coaching was making sure that my players grew as people, improved as athletes, and enjoyed the journey and not just focus on wins and losses.
Bob Krizancic, Mentor High School, Mentor Ohio.
Bob Krizancic, Mentor High School. The most important thing I learned from my players, and at a very, very early age in my coaching career, was that they were not going to be all in to my program, to our team, unless they knew that I was all in to them in their lives, their academics, their future, their success. Once I learned that and that we built that relationship, things were so much easier, and it was the only way to coach. Right now, after 40-some years in my coaching career, we do so many things together as a team and their families. You know, I believe that we are a family, and we start the season off right at the beginning with a cookout with not only parents, players, cheerleaders, but also all the siblings. So, again, invest in your players, their future, their academics. Try to make them elite in every way possible, and I guarantee you, your coaching career will be so much better.
Your first impression is everything when applying for a new coaching job. A professional coaching portfolio is the tool that highlights your coaching achievements and philosophies, and most of all, helps separate you and your abilities from the other applicants. The Coaching Portfolio Guide is an instructional, membership-based website that helps you develop a personalized portfolio. Each section of the Portfolio Guide provides detailed instructions on how to organize your portfolio in a professional manner. The guide also provides sample documents for each section of your portfolio that you can copy, modify, and add to your personal portfolio. As a Hoopheads Pod listener, you can get your Coaching Portfolio Guide for just $25. Visit coachingportfolioguide.com/hoopheads to learn more. Dell Leonard, Mountain Home High School, Mountain Home, Arkansas.
What is the number one lesson you've learned from one of your players or teams over the course of your coaching career? When I read this, several answers immediately came to mind. I'm sure any coach who's been in this profession long enough has experienced these same lessons. I learned early in my career that all players respond differently. What works for one does not work for the other. That was a hard adjustment for me as a young coach. We've all heard the old saying, if you care for them and you are fair, you will get the most out of them. I think that we have to treat all players fairly, but we also have to remember that fair is not the same for every player's situation. You may have to understand what is fair depending on their personal needs. Fair doesn't have the same meaning for every player. You have to be aware of what's going on in their life. You have to be aware of their home situation outside the game. School and basketball may be the only place they feel needed, important, or part of something. A school day or a basketball road trip may be the only place they get a good meal. I learned that sometimes we don't realize or see that our most talented players, our starters, or our kids who get a lot of minutes or media attention, they still need words of affirmation. On that same note, in high school, your role players may not be college-bound players, but you still have to invest in their lives and their high school careers and let them know how important they are to the team. Another lesson that I look back on is don't be so quick to dismiss a player. If a player makes a mistake and they are regretful of the mistake, don't be too proud to give them a second chance. Sometimes those players have the greatest success stories. On that same note, don't get too comfortable with players. They all can change quickly. In closing, if I had to give just one answer to this week's question, it would be, don't judge a kid by their parents. Sometimes the kid has nothing to do with their parents' actions. This is hard, but you have to remember that your job is to help the kid, and they don't get to pick who their parents are.
Matt Monroe, St. Ignatius College Prep in Chicago, Illinois.
One of the most rewarding aspects of coaching is having the opportunity each year to learn from the players and teams in which you coach. Over the years, I have learned a ton of valuable lessons each season that have not only made me a stronger coach, but a better person as well. It is hard to pick which lesson is the number one most valuable lesson I have learned, since there have been so many. However, this past season that my team at St. Ignatius College Prep in Chicago had is a great example of some of the lessons you can learn from your players, your teams, and your fellow coaches. We started the season ranked number 4 in the state and had the highest preseason expectations in our program's 100-plus year history. We loaded up our schedule with a ton of challenging games, hoping to prepare ourselves for a deep playoff run in March. From the first tip, though, our team experienced several challenges and many ups and downs. Despite our high expectations, we started the season 3-4 with some close losses to quality teams. After those first 7 games, we began to really hit our stride, beating a few of our rivals and playing some of the best basketball of the season. Then, in the middle of December, COVID hit our team. We had an 11-day pause from practicing and a 16-day break from playing any games. When we came back as a team for our Christmas tournament at the end of the month, we were way behind where we normally would be, and it felt like our team started preseason all over again. We dropped some games we were not expected to and fell to 8-7, going into by far our toughest stretch of the season, as we played 6 straight games against teams ranked in the top 25. No matter what, our team stuck together. They never stopped believing in our program, in our team, and most importantly, in themselves. The unbreakable bonds that our kids developed through their years of preparation paid off greatly. Was there disappointment and frustration about our slow start? Definitely. Did people on the outside looking in lose faith in our team? Sure. However, our players and coaches never did. The first game we played against the toughest part of our schedule, we lost on a last-second buzzer beater. While a lot of teams would have folded, our players began to believe in themselves even more. We went on to win our next 4 games against highly ranked opponents. Now, the rest of the season wouldn't be without adversity, as we suffered through some injuries and dropped a few more close games. However, we used that adversity to grow stronger together and ended up advancing to the Final 4 in the state playoffs in March, the best finish in our school's history. Our players and team this year taught me many valuable lessons, ones in which I believe were the reason for our success at the very end of the year. Among those lessons were the importance of playing for each other, the value of adversity as a tool to grow, and the impact of never losing faith in yourself and your teammates. Most importantly, our team showed that if you build unbreakable bonds and love each other no matter what, anything is possible as long as you always stick together.
Matthew Raidbard, author of Lead Like a Pro.
Hey Hoopheads Nation, this is Coach Matt Raidbard here with you. Glad to be back for another Hoopheads Roundtable, talking about the number one lesson that I've learned from one of my players and teams over the course of my coaching career. And this is definitely one where as soon as I read the question, I immediately knew what that lesson was. It was one of my players who eventually became an assistant coach on our staff who told me that the team and the player's personality is a reflection of the head coach. And at first when he said that to me, I didn't exactly understand what he meant. If a head coach is tough or a head coach is resilient, you could see that reflected in the team. But when he said personality, that was something I hadn't really considered before, but I was really interested. And as we talked more about it, I really understood that it's not just about some of those, really overt characteristics like toughness or resiliency or, being really larger than life, right? That's exhibited in your team. It's also a lot of your little behaviors, your attention to detail, your collaboration, your communication. All those aspects of your personality become reflected in your team because your team is exposed to them over and over, day after day. And especially when you're experiencing success, the team will really latch on to a lot of those personality traits and adopt them. But also when you're experiencing challenging times, your team can rebel against them because they feel like they're not working and they don't want to be exhibiting those themselves. So that was a piece of advice and a lesson that I learned from one of my players that I thought was really important and I've always carried with me, that the team is a reflection of the personality of the head coach. All right, thanks, Hoopheads Nation. Appreciate you having me on this month's roundtable.
John Schulman, University of Alabama Huntsville, and the 720 Sports Group.
This is John Schulman, head basketball coach at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And the question, pretty simple question. What is the number one lesson you've learned from one of your players or teams over the course of your coaching career? I guess the number one lesson, and I've learned a lot, but the number one lesson and the biggest lesson that I've learned is once you get back with those guys after it's over, and you get a little older like I am, and you get with your guys, and they don't ever talk about the games. They don't ever talk about, boy, that loss stung or that win was incredible. It's the journey, and it's the little things. And, we get caught up in the moment of winning and losing at the moment, but they're not, they want to win. They don't hurt as bad as coaches, and they don't celebrate as high as coaches, and they're not focused on that. They want a better experience. They want a great experience. They want to have fun. They want to play. We don't want to play good people as coaches because it may affect our record. They don't care. They want to play good people. They want to play in cool venues. They want to do fun things. No, we can't go out and get good food that night. We got to focus on the game. They want to go to a Japanese steakhouse and hang out and have a blast before the game. We have to realize that it really is not about us, and it's about them. Will Healy, football coach at Charlotte, it's all about the kids' experience at Charlotte football, like it was at Austin Peay football. It's all about the kids' experience. Are they having a great experience? If they're having a great experience, they'll end up playing harder for you, and you'll accidentally win basketball games, win football games, whatever you're coaching. So I guess the biggest lesson is, focus on the kids. Focus on the kids. Focus on the process. Quit worrying about winning and losing games and focus on the kids. And I think everything will work out how it's supposed to work out. And remember, once everything's said and done and they're 45 years old, that loss wherever on that Thursday night that you thought was devastating, they don't even remember it, nor do they care about it. But they do care that time that you remember their birthday, or maybe something happened with their family and you reached out to them. They remember that. They remember the little things along the way in the journey and you being there for them as family. They may not remember every game as we do as coaches. So I think we need to change our mindset and just focus on those kids. It doesn't mean, I'm not saying be soft on them. I'm saying Love them, be tough on them, hold them accountable and responsible and reliable, and they'll have an amazing experience. Hope this helps.
Joe's Decision. Unleash Potential, Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Joe's Decision, Unleash Potential. This month's question is, what is the number one lesson you learned from one of your teams throughout your coaching career? I would say the number one lesson I learned, and it wasn't just one team, one primary team, but different teams throughout my coaching career. The number one lesson that I learned is, for me, the teams with maybe not as much talent as other teams that I have coached actually accomplished more success than some of the more talented teams that I coached when I was the head coach of Carlisle High School here in Pennsylvania. And the reason for that, I think, is, especially one team I'm thinking of particularly in 2007, they were by far collectively not the most talented team, but they all hung out together on the court. I mean, they got along very well together on the court. They got along very well together off the court. They were all bought in. They weren't worried about, who was going to get the credit for winning. They actually enjoyed sharing the credit of winning, and they were perfect teammates. They were coachable. The buy-in was there. They worked hard. They communicated with each other. They weren't jealous of each other. I had teams that were very much more talented than that team and a couple of the other teams with less talent. But it really taught me early on that you don't have to have the most talented teams to win. Actually, team chemistry, and bonding were much more important than talent. Because a lot of times when you have very talented teams, there's a lot of egos, a lot of jealousy. They're worried about, who is going to be the high scorer, who is getting more colleges looking at them. So, throughout my career, I would say that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned from a team or maybe a couple of teams, that teams that don't have as much talent sometimes can take themselves farther, into the district playoffs, into the state playoffs, than teams that maybe were supposed to make it that far. And it's interesting because now when I look back and I talk to some of those, those players on the more talented teams, I think they come to the realization and understanding that, it should have been more about the team, not about them. I think now that they realize that, they wish that maybe they would have done things differently when they played the game instead of, they always say there's no I in team. So, again, the teams that bond together, have great relationships, great team cohesion, camaraderie. I think, as a coach, a lot of times, and they're probably my favorite teams also, because no one expected them to go as far as they did, whether it's the district playoffs and state playoffs. And I can think of that 2007 team in particular, that they went to the semifinals of the district. They went into the state playoffs, and they just had a very, very, very great season. And that's one of the teams that I really take a lot of pride in, and one of my favorite teams to coach. So that would be my answer for this month. Thank you.
Thanks for checking out this month's Hoopheads Podcast Roundtable. We'll be back next month with another question for our all-star lineup of coaches.
Thanks for listening to the Hoopheads Podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.